Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that, and I laugh because we have these like serious conversations about things, and then Cisco thong song comes on, so that's pretty funny. Okay, so let's go ahead and call Leah and jump right into it. You think I'd have her number on speed dial? I should probably do that.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. How's it going?
Great. That's like 10 on the dot, right? Look
Yeah.
at that.
So impressive.
I've been doing the podcast for about, I don't know, 5 minutes, and I just did the playlist shuffle. And I'm gonna tell you this. Wait, actually, I'm gonna play the song for you that came up in just a second. But I was just really proud of myself because I did the timing perfect. It like 10 hit, and I was dialing your number. I'm like so professional.
I can't handle how good I am.
Oh my god! All right, hold on. This actually, the playlist shuffle I did this time was hilarious because of the song that came up.
Okay.
And I'm going to see if I can play this really quick over the loudspeaker and let you see if you can hear this. This was so ridiculous. I was like, oh my god! Like your friends and family are going to listen to this. They're going to be like, oh my god, what is going on here? Hold on. Let's see if I can
Okay.
find this. This is really bad.
I'm trying to think like what could this be? What song could this be?
All right, here.
This is
It's not in that playlist. All right, hold on a second here. I can't play it on my
okay.
phone because I'm on the phone with you, so I got to go find it on my computer.
Okay, gotcha.
So while I'm looking for this, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Yeah, I just blazed through Chinatown this morning, dropping cash everywhere.
Man, what time did you get up? It's 10
I
a.m. Everybody.
know. Why did I get up at I woke up at like seven something. Ridiculous.
Oh, on a
But I'm
weekend.
so excited to go see my nephews, and I always take them a ton of Chinese pastries. That's like our thing now,
Oh,
doing my
okay.
little Asian auntie thing. So, and I have to go before they sell out because they like
Right.
sell out super early. All these like elderly, Chinese people and whatever, they like in there eating their pastries, I guess. I don't know who buys it.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I buy like so much of it. So, anyway, so I went to do all that.
Okay. So you've been up and at it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think I found the song.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Is this gonna work? Can you hear anything?
A little bit, yeah.
I'm gonna try to turn it up a little bit more. Can you hear anything?
Not very well. It's
Okay.
pretty quiet.
Hold on. Can you hear anything?
Yeah.
Did you recognize it?
It's hard. It's kind of like it's a little fuzzy, which
Okay.
I heard like some pieces, but
Okay, hold on. I don't have a way to drive it right into the phone. Like I said, I got to figure that out. But it's Cisco thong song.
why? Why?
I was like, oh, this is ridiculous,
As we pick up our conversation about racial fetishes.
right? And I was saying when you go back and listen to the beginning, I just started cracking up. I was like, oh, this is so appropriate.
In a weird, inappropriate kind of way.
Like we're tackling like these extremely serious issues, and then Cisco comes up singing thong song. What the hell am I listening to?
Come on, Matt. Get your music together.
But I was saying that's the whole point of the playlist shuffle is you can't control it. You
Right.
know, you just hit
Right.
shuffle and let the cards fall where they may.
Outed yourself today. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding. Just
I
kidding.
told everybody get a drink wherever you were, and just listen to the thong song and
Oh my
strap
gosh.
in. No pun intended. I'm sorry.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
gonna
My
get fired
stomach
from my
hurts
own
from laughing
podcast.
already. What's that?
So I'm gonna get fired from my own podcast.
You're grounded for four podcast sessions.
Yeah, I'll just put
Just
repeats
kidding.
on. Okay, got that out the
Oh
way.
my
I had a,
gosh.
that was funny. I mean, usually I have to have somebody here to enjoy that. I mean, you're kind of here, but whatever.
You try to bring me in, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know how we segue from that into what we're going into. So I guess we just jump in the deep end. So
I
Leah,
just
tell me.
like cough laughed there. That was so attractive. People think I'm dying.
just let's just jump into the deep end here, man. Let's go. Racial fetishes. What do you got? So
Okay,
abrupt.
let's see.
Okay, so where do we end off? We were talking about you were saying because this actually made a lot of people think. I got some feedback from where you said your dad you asked your dad what was your mother and he said Christian.
Right.
And then that took us down that religious conversation that I think was really productive. So that's where we I think ended up last time. I don't know if you had that jotted down.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you get any sort of feedback you want to share or
I had one person come up to me and was talking to me about how all the religions are talking about the same thing. Or not all of them, but most of them. They all kind of have like this Jesus figure, or there's some kind of prophet or representative of God, and I guess they were just acknowledging that maybe I guess I'm reading between the lines here. They didn't specifically say this to me, but it just kind of felt like they were wanting to communicate to me that the stuff we were talking about is not really stuff that you hear people talk about. I guess openly.
sure.
I guess these are like closed door conversations people have,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
and talking about them out in public and everything is just I don't maybe it's jarring. I don't know. I can just imagine if like we were on like let's say we had like I don't know millions of listeners. Could you just imagine like social media reacting to the things we talk about?
Yeah. Be
I
kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, I feel like it would just be madness. I can't even read these comments. I felt like there would be some good mixed in with some bad.
Right.
But I think we too often focus on the negative and the bad because I'm sitting here thinking, oh, the bad comments would be outrageous, and I don't. I guess I wouldn't even want to focus on that for being honest.
I mean, I think if you had millions of listeners, you don't have time to sift through all that anyways. You don't care, right? You have enough
Right?
listeners that
Yeah,
whatever. If you don't like it, don't listen.
exactly. Like, why are you tuning in if you hate it so
I mean,
much?
if you're at that point, it's just like, well, there's enough other people.
I hate your
Just like,
podcast, but I listen to all of it.
right, exactly. And rant every time.
Yeah,
Send you hate mail.
hey, sounds like you're a fan.
Yeah.
I hate you guys. Okay,
Frenemy.
there you go.
Um, yeah, well, good. I mean, it's always interesting to hear what kind of resonates with people and, because we talk about a lot, we typically talk about a lot of different topics. So
Right,
it's
right.
nice to hear, um, what's connecting with people. So, yeah. So, okay. So, yeah. So last time we were talking about my parents' relationship and then we kind of, kind of got off into religion and Christianity for a while. So I kind of want to maybe get back into my parents' relationship a little bit, and I'm
Yeah,
sure we'll probably trail off again, but kind of see where the conversation leads. Does
sure.
that
Yeah,
sound good?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple other things that, not that I want to just like just talk about my parents' relationship this whole time, but a couple other, like, I think important points to hit on about their
Well,
relationship.
I think that relates to people though. I mean, I know it may feel like
Right.
I'm just talking about my family and my parents, but other people are having these issues, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
very true.
I think it's nice.
Um, yeah, so I think another big thing with my dad, with the whole um, being racist, being a white supremacist, but marrying a person of color, um, I think it mattered to him, like in their case, that she was Asian and not black. Like
Right.
I think for him, um, that made the cognitive dissonance and the mental hoops that he jumped through easier because we have this racial hierarchy in the US. And again, this is one of those things that people don't necessarily talk about a ton, maybe, or name it. But Asians typically, are kind of conceived of as being kind of the next step below whites, right?
I hear
Kind
you.
of
I hear you
like,
dancing. Blacks are at the bottom of the food chain.
right, blacks are at the bottom. You have whites at the top, then you have Asian, like, well, Eastern Asian, and then you have like South Asian, Southeast Asian, the darker skin, the darker you get, the farther down the hierarchy you go, right? And so I think, for him, the fact that she was Asian kind of enabled, like, I don't think he would have been with a black woman, I guess is basically what I'm trying to say. Or even a South Asian woman who, was darker skinned or
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that real quick because it's like the shade of skin. The darker the skin gets, the more you're kind of ostracized in society.
right.
That's why like the really really dark black people. Let me say this real quick because this just came to mind. My little brother is much darker than I am,
Okay.
and I'm not as dark as him. And growing up, my mom always had me watch out for him because she knew
Yeah.
about that, and he was
Right.
mistreated because his skin was darker than mine, and I was given a better treatment than some dark kids because my skin's lighter than
Right.
his, and that's just really fucked up.
Right.
But I had to watch out for my little brother because he was darker,
Yeah.
and you don't hear
Yeah.
people talk about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly what we're talking about. And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, so there's that piece. Um, I think it's also important to note with my parents, um, so, some of the stereotypes that come in, well, kind of the sexism piece and stereotypes of Asian women,
Hmm.
right? Like my dad was also like a raging sexist, like super sexist, in
Hmm.
addition to being racist. It's a great um, combo meal. So, I think he wanted someone who was going to cook and clean and wait on him and do those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that my mom, was like 150% that person, but being raised in a very traditional Chinese household
Hmm.
in the area or the era that she was raised in, that is what she was taught. That's actually what I was taught growing up. That, like, this was like my role as a woman. I mean, to cook and to clean. And I mean, my mom also taught my brothers those things,
Yeah.
but it was definitely emphasized for me, that was kind of my arena, my area as a woman. And my dad, that's definitely what he wanted. And so I think that was another thing that maybe played into him deciding to marry a woman of color when he was racist.
Yeah.
And my friend, I think I've mentioned her before. My friend Evelyn spent her first maybe decade and a half in Zimbabwe, and she and I talk about this a lot. That there are men out there that they want to marry an African woman or they want to marry an Asian woman because they want those like traditional gender roles. And I think I'm not even saying there's anything inherently wrong with being like fitting into some of those stereotypical gender roles. But I think it's all about if you're choosing to do that or if you're expected to do that or feeling forced to fit into that. But yeah, I think that was another, probably appeal to my father,
Yeah.
because of who he was. Um, so yeah, I guess that's kind of the brief-ish overview, um, of my parents' relationship and kind of answering that question of how could your dad, marry a person of color if he's racist. Um,
Can I ask you something?
yeah, of course.
Um, and if this takes us down to the rabbit hole, we can come back to it. I
Okay.
just don't want to forget. Do you have, I guess, any perspective into your mom's view?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And I mean, it's kind of a like sad question for me. Not that I'm like over here like, damn it, Matt, why'd you ask that? I'm not over here crying. But
Yeah, but
I think I mentioned before that she passed away when I
yeah,
was in my late teens. And my mom was not someone who was able to really open up very easily
yeah,
to friends, to my dad, to even her best friends. I don't know how much of that. I mean, I think a lot of that was cultural. That she was living in an environment that was not her dominant culture. There's very different ways of communicating.
yeah,
Asian communication styles are very indirect, and Western communication, U.S. communication is very direct. She was kind of a fish out of water, so to speak.
yeah.
Even though she was raised in the U.S., she was raised with all those culturally Chinese ways of being and communicating. And so I think a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that she did try to talk to people and they didn't understand her. And I just say that because that was my experience, even as someone who was much more Americanized than she was. I tried to talk to people. I mean, I think we talked about this in the first episode we did, to mentors, counselors, pastors, friends, best friends, um, about issues of race and culture and issues I was having and struggles I was having, and they just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to know, to answer your question, like a lot of my mom's thoughts. I mean, I have some guesses in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
but it's not maybe stuff that she ever explicitly stated to me, or to others,
Okay.
that I know of. Um, but I do know, just to delve into that a little more, so my grandparents, um, owned a laundromat in southern Indiana. They didn't start out there. They started out on the West Coast and then had a laundromat in St. Louis for a while. The business deal, they had gone into business with like a cousin or something my
Hmm.
grandfather had, and it kind of went bad. The relationship went bad. And so my grandfather moved, then to Evansville. I'm not sure why. That was a question that ate away at me for a very long time. Like, why the hell did you decide to move to freaking Evansville, Indiana?
Yeah.
Like, why? 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 Um, but and we were actually the first Chinese family in Evansville, like,
Wow.
period. And so there are all these, it's kind of creepy and weird, but also awesome. I have dozens of articles that were written in the newspaper. Like the local newspapers followed my family,
What?
um, for years. Yeah,
Really?
because we were like exotic. We were strange. We were, like the first Asian folks that a lot of these white folks had seen. This was in the 30s, 1930s through, what, 1950s or 60s.
Yeah.
So, so I have all these articles, but the language in it is so archaic, like family from Red China,
What?
and yeah, and like Oriental man, blah blah blah. I mean, the language is, the language that was being used in that era. And so those articles have actually given me, so a lot of insight into more of my family history. Um, but anyways, yeah, so we were the first Chinese family in that area, ran this laundry. Um, and then after, sometime right after my mom was the youngest, right after she graduated from high school, her parents decided to move to Chicago. Um, her oldest brother had already moved to Chicago with his family, and so her parents decided to make that move. And I mean, I'm assuming, I'm pretty sure she had the option to go with them, but she decided to stay. She decided to stay in Evansville. I'm like, Mom, why?
Yeah.
My life's trajectory could have been so different. Well, maybe I wouldn't even exist. Who knows? But anyways, but she decided to stay in Evansville, and I don't know if that was just, you know, I know her parents were very had extremely high expectations as far as grades and that sort of thing, kind of like your, typical Asian parents. And she didn't have a lot of freedom with them. And so I don't know if part of it was wanting to get out from under their roof to have, more freedom. Um, if that was just her comfort zone, that's where she'd been raised. And, that was what she knew. And she didn't want to deal with a big change. But for whatever reason, she decided to stay in Southern Indiana. And then a couple years later, she met my dad, and that whole, part of her life started. But I know that she always struggled to really connect deeply with people. And that was something after my mom passed away that I would get so frustrated with my dad over, because that, that community, that town of 500 that I grew up in, and that surrounding, that county, there were women that my mom was like acquaintances with, and she was friends with them, but it wasn't like a deep friendship. And my dad
Yeah.
kind of like demonized her for that. Like, well, these women want to be your mom's friend, and why doesn't she put more effort, or why doesn't she want to be their friend? And I'm like, Dad, are you an idiot? Like, they don't understand her. These women, like these white women that have lived in a town of 500 their entire lives, there's only so deep mom, of a relationship that mom can have with them. And
Yeah.
so I know that she really struggled, and that's not to say she didn't have friends. She did have friends. But I know that she really struggled. And even within our family, I've already talked about my dad. You kind of know where he was, as far as not really understanding her. And, he didn't stand up for her with his family. They were not every member of the family, but his parents and a lot of his siblings never really accepted my mom, and were very open about that. They were very racist towards her. And she, did everything for decades to be like a good daughter-in-law, and like buy presents for them at Christmas, and make food for them, and to try to like win them over. And they
Yeah.
never, I mean, it was finally on my mom's deathbed. She was literally on her deathbed, and my grandpa was finally like, well, she's a really good woman, and I'm sad she's dying, or something like that. And I'm like, well, great. Now that matters.
Yeah.
Like, now that, now that she's like dying, you realize that maybe you treated her like shit. Well, thank you for nothing. So anyways, sorry, that may have been a really long tangent, but yeah,
No,
my
I was
kind
just
of
curious if you had any insight into her perspective, because we talked so much about how your dad
about my
viewed
dad.
how he viewed it, and I was kind of just curious about how your mom viewed it. If you even
Yeah.
knew, if she even shared anything with you, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think I don't talk about that so much because I don't have as much insight. I didn't have as much time with
Yeah.
her. But I do feel like she probably went the route of trying to assimilate,
Yeah.
not even maybe consciously. It may have I mean, like I said, they were the first Chinese family in Evansville, and then she ends up marrying my dad and moving to this small rural white town. Like that's kind of a survival
I was
once
going to
you're in that.
ask you that. That was my next question. Was, do you think it was kind of a survival thing?
I mean, I think once you're in that situation, if you're going to stay in that situation, you know, like you kind of have to do what you got to do to make friends or to have some sort of social life. Or like I look back again even on my life, being more Americanized than she was, being half white, so therefore more acceptable in some, you know, white circles. And, you know, I look back and I'm like, damn, look at everything I did, all the like pain I swallowed and all the racism I overlooked and like everything I did to myself. Not that I was doing it to myself, others were doing it to me, but then, you know, how I chose to handle that because that was everyone around me. So what was I going to do? Like,
Yeah.
you know, you have to, it is kind of a survival thing.
Let me ask you this. I've heard this statement referred to with black people, but I'm sure it applies to other races and ethnicities, cultures. But I heard somebody say once that black people move through the world playing defense, and white people move through the world playing offense.
Right.
Have you ever heard something like that?
Yeah.
Because like you think about it, white people don't. They don't. I mean, I can't. I'm not speaking blanketly for all white people, but I'm saying my understanding of their world is they move through the world just doing, just
Right.
living, just existing, doing, living,
Right.
being regular, being normal. You know, black people, Asian people, whatever, whoever it could be. I can speak from my own personal, background. We move through the world, unfortunately, playing defense to a degree. Like,
Yeah.
how am I viewed? I don't want to upset these people. I need to change my voice for this job interview. I need to make sure I'm not threatening. I probably need to wear my hair a little more natural
Right.
or groom so I don't, intimidate anybody. Like, we're constantly doing that mentally. I hate that, and I don't want to say I hate myself for that, but it's just kind of a survival thing, which is why I thought about what you were just saying in those terms.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I mean, you just hit on, you know, that's what we mean by white privilege, right? Like white privilege doesn't mean you don't have hardships in life or everything's handed to you on a silver platter, but it means you're not dealing with the obstacles and the burdens and the trauma and the psychological load, right?
Right.
That people of color deal with on an every single day basis, which is just exactly what you just described. Like all these, like the strategizing and how to move through a world and through our jobs and through dating relationships or what platonic relationships, move through whatever in this world that's very white and created for whiteness.
Yeah.
um yeah, and so, you know, I recognize a lot of that in myself. And you know, I eventually decided to kind of to stop doing that. I don't know if you ever 100% stop are able to stop doing that in the context of the
Yeah, it's kind
US.
of ingrained in you.
Well, it's ingrained in you, and it's just unless you're moving in completely POC spaces, like in every single facet of your life, then it's just not even really a possibility, right? Like at my job, like where I work, my bosses are white. I still have to bite my tongue here and there, and you know,
Yeah.
I have to do stuff to to keep my job and that sort of thing. So, but I think for me, my once I got out of that area, that Southern Indiana, and was in grad school, I decided that I kind of made this decision that like I am passionate enough about these issues that I'm gonna go here and let the chips fall where they may. Like, but I was in a place then that I could do that because I had other friends, I had other social circles. I wasn't completely immersed in whiteness, and so I had kind of the safety and the resources, and I don't mean financial resources, right? But like social resources and relational resources to be able to say, okay, if this, like, if I lose all my friends from Southern Indiana over this, then I can survive,
Yeah.
right? So anyways, I definitely know that my mom was in that situation to an even greater degree than I was, living in that area. And that's kind of heartbreaking for me because I know the toll that that's taken on me. And I can only imagine that being doubled or tripled for her.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe I don't talk about my mom too much because it's like sad for me, to think about that she lived in this like racial isolation, married to this man who was super racist and his family didn't accept her. And, when I really think about like all the factors in her life, um, I know it wasn't easy. And I remember one time when she said that we were teenagers, we kids, and I forget, we had kind of a little family blow up about something. I don't even remember what it was about. And she just like started crying and she said, I feel like you're all against me. And she was talking about like us kids and my dad. And I know that it was a cultural thing. Like we did not understand her as a Chinese woman, as an Asian woman. And when you don't understand something and it's different from everyone else in your context, you demonize that.
Hmm.
You view that negatively. You view that as wrong or weird or strange or crazy or whatever. And so, it just like breaks my heart to think that my mom, felt that even from her own children and spouse, so um yeah.
Yeah, that's it's definitely not the exact same thing, but it's funny because my mom is from Memphis, Tennessee, and I don't know if you've ever been to Memphis, but it's different now. The demographics are much different, but when she was there, it was predominantly black, like just a black city, black people everywhere. She grew up kind of in that black cocoon, right?
Right.
Safe circle. And when she married my dad, African American male, because of his job, they ended up moving to Indiana. I
Really?
swear to God,
Wait, what?
Indiana.
I didn't realize your family lived in Indiana.
I
What
can't
part?
maybe I don't know. I can't remember. I never lived there. It was my mom and dad before I was born,
Okay.
and I can't remember what part. I'll follow up with you on that. But
Yeah, let me know.
it was Indiana, and my mom tells me stories about how like scared she was
Yeah.
because she went from all black people to all white people,
Right.
and it terrified her. She talked about it and how she didn't like to go out and all these other things, and she was away from her home and her mother and all of her, all of that. And I guess I was just saying, I think the circumstances are kind of interesting how they it was both in Indiana,
Well, I mean,
and
like
then the
I say,
culture
and
shock of all of it.
right. Well, and I'm super interested being from Indiana, like what part they were in. I mean, I'm pretty open with people that I think Indiana is a trash state. Not that I mean all, not that I mean, I've never said that to you.
No.
That's one of my little phrases. Not that I mean every person in Indiana is like, I'm not talking about the people necessarily. Well, I guess I am kind of. Sorry. Let me explain this before I get in trouble. Um, but that was like one of the things I learned in grad school. Like I started trying to figure out like why is Indiana so crappy in so many ways and so racist and so this and so that. And I remembered actually from my time in school right out of high school when I came to school in Chicago, I remembered one of my black friends telling me, oh, Indiana, like black folks don't go to Indiana. Like I'm not going there. Mm-mm, nope. No,
Yeah.
thank you. And I didn't ask him at the time, like, well, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? But that phrase, that comment he made, stayed in. the back of my brain somewhere all of these years. And so when I was in grad school, I finally started, I'm like, okay, I need to figure this out. Like something is going on here. And so I researched the history of Indiana, and Indiana was like the headquarters for the KKK for like years, strong KKK presence. Like the whole government in the like 1920s, it was like well known that you had to be KKK, like well connected to the Klan to get into office in the state of India, like into the government. Um, and that whole thing ended up coming to light when it was this horrid story. I can't remember this guy's name, but he was like the Grand Dragon, or like up there in the clan hierarchy. I don't know all the terminology. And he ended up like kidnapping this woman and raping her, and she um like survived for a couple of days. She
Wow.
passed away a couple days later, but she like lived for a couple of days and was able to, tell someone what had happened, who had done this to her. And so when they caught the perpetrator and started, like unraveling his clan connections, and because he was, I think, in high up in the government too. I can't remember for sure. It's been a while since I've read about this. But I guess after he got busted, he decided to like rat out all of his friends. And so then it just kind of like unraveled this whole just like scandal that pretty much like the entire state government in Indiana were like Klan members. And there's a bunch of stats I remember too, just like the super high percentage of men in Indiana that were part of the Klan. I mean, it's anyways, so it's just that's why, I mean, all that is still present today. Like that doesn't just go away, like just
Yeah.
because we're a couple generations later. So once I found out that, and Ohio is actually quite similar.
Yeah.
Ohio has a very similar history, and I also consider it to be a trash state. But anyways,
Wait, hold on a second. I just texted my mom. She was in
oh,
Fort
Fort
Wayne,
Wayne.
Indiana.
Okay. I don't know
Um,
as much about northern Indiana, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm
Um,
sure it couldn't have been good.
I don't know anything about Indiana. And, I mean, I've driven through it several times, but I've never had a reason to stop. Maybe Indianapolis once. But obviously, I've lived in Ohio, and I mean, I don't feel as strongly about it as you do. But I will say, um, one of the reasons we came to Texas was because of all the what's the word, like there was a lot of subtle racism in the city, at least in Columbus,
Right.
because I lived there, so I can speak directly to that. And there was a lot of the like real, it's subversive. It was just real quiet. It wasn't in your face, and I hated it because like you could go to a store and like not get service and just weird things like that. And I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist in Texas. It does, but the difference with the racism here, and I always tell people this, is it's in your face.
Right.
So I know who I'm dealing with.
Right. Right.
It's not
Which
real
could be
subtle.
considered better or worse depending on who you're talking to.
Right.
But I get what you're saying
So
though.
yeah, that's that.
Yeah, I had some weird experiences in Columbus, which I don't know if we want to go into those, but because there was there's a pretty large international student population at OSU,
Yeah.
like Asian international students. I mean, it's like 5%, so it's not like it's not like 50%, but um, and so I would just get these weird, like people that would ask me if I speak English because they're used to dealing with international students, I guess. And I would just like look at them like, why don't you just talk to me and then you'll find out?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just say something? Um, or that would, or, and people would react very strangely often in Columbus to what I was studying.
Yeah.
Because Ohio State's so big, there's all these like PhD students and master's students. And so, uh, oh, what are you studying? I would just meet random people doing whatever, and I'd be like, oh, African American and African studies. And this one dude, I think he was Asian, was like, are you black?
Yeah.
And I'm like, do I look black? You're standing in front of me. It's daylight. Like, I don't know. There were just some
And
weird situations there.
me and you talked about that, I think off air,
Yeah.
where you said, I can't remember what you said, but it was something to the effect of, that's how bad the racism is.
Right. That people can't imagine that you would be interested in doing black studies if you're
Right.
not black.
Like only black people can do that.
Yeah, only black people would care. Only black people would be interested in black studies.
Yeah.
That's how much like black folks and everything about black folks are is seen as like inferior or unworthy. I'm just like, y'all study Shakespeare and European shit all the time. That's everybody studies that and nobody questions that.
Preach.
Like, right? But I'm not black and I'm studying black studies, and now all of a sudden you're looking at me and you think, even though you can tell, like, I don't look black, like, phenotypically,
Yeah.
but you think I must be. So yeah, anyways, Columbus, Ohio. Okay. Let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Unless you have other
Oh, I can talk about Columbus all day. But like I said, my views aren't as strong as yours, but I do have a lot of racial issues, with Columbus.
Well, because Columbus it's an overgrown small town. It's an overgrown
Yes.
college town.
Yes, I
And like
always said
everybody,
something like to that effect. I was like, Columbus is like a giant, or not a giant. It's a big small town.
that's exactly what it is. I mean, that's why it's not like, because I think Columbus is maybe what? It's pretty high up there as far as size.
Yeah.
It's like the 16th largest city in the US or something like that. I mean, it's pretty high up there on the scale, but it's not. There are other cities that are that size, the size of Columbus or smaller, that have ginormous metropolitan areas that then make it seem more like a city of a couple million. That is not Columbus.
Yeah.
Like, Columbus is cornfields. You go outside of, like, a mile outside of Columbus and you're in the freaking cornfields. And so it's really like exactly what you said, a giant small town / college town. And so, yeah, I mean, I liked Columbus. I liked my time there. But it very quickly felt really small.
Okay.
In a way that I didn't expect that it was going to.
All right, I have to tell you something.
Okay.
Like, mark your spot. I'll make this as quick as I can. And I don't think I told you this. Did I ever tell you I tried to build a recording studio / entertainment venue in Columbus?
Lord.
Did I ever tell you that?
Oh, Lord. No.
I've never said
But
this publicly, I don't think.
it's your confession.
But you also know I'm into music production and all that. And did you ever go to the King Lincoln district?
Yes.
Did you ever go down there? I can't remember what street that is.
Yeah, our department had a community center, like an extension center down there, and
Down over
I
there.
worked down there for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so I basically came up with the idea to build this recording studio / entertainment space where people could hear live music, and it made record label level resources available to everyday people, because I was big in the music community.
Right.
And so came up with this idea, worked on it for about a year and a half, business plan, all of that, had an architect.
Oh no.
Oh wait, you know where this is going? Okay. And
I'm so sad already.
right. And it was literally on that I can't remember that street. Oh my god.
I know what you're talking about. There's a big theater there. And
yes.
some like very historic, like the historic black part of town.
Right there. And so there was a lady there, shout out to Charity. She had a coffee shop. right?
Okay.
And I can't remember the name of the coffee shop. She had had it there for a couple years, I think, that she opened, and she was black and she was the owner. And the community loved it and accepted it, and it was working well over there. And it was down the street from the theater, and so I got with her, and she brought me in and introduced me to all these community people and other businesses in the area. And I had to present my idea to them, and I'm like, look, I want to help build this area up like the short north, but
Okay. Yeah.
like an urban short north, right?
Right, right, right.
And I was going to attract new business with what I was doing, and we're going to make this really interesting street here.
Kind
And
of like
so,
revitalize the area.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so it was going to attract more business, and I had the community. The community was behind me. Everybody was behind me, and there was a building over there that was an old rundown building. I'm gonna put this on blast. Oh, okay. I hope they listen to this, or somebody shares it, because this is the truth. Okay. And so there was this building over there called the Edna,
Okay.
and it was this old building that was run down, overgrown with plant life. It was maybe 3 levels, and I had the architect draw up everything we needed to redo this, not tear it down because it was an old historical building, just revamp it and all that. And architect had these floor plans. It was all done. There was money that President Obama had set aside for urban communities, like these large grants that you
Okay.
didn't have to pay back.
Okay.
And it was for urban development, urban economic development. And I can't tell you how I found out about that money, but I found out about that money, and it was supposed to be public information, but
Okay.
nobody knew about it. Okay.
Right, right, right.
And so I found out about this money, and I had a meeting. I can't remember who I met with, somebody in the economic development department, present everything to them. Basically, they gave me I had a lot of things a lot of stipulations, a lot of things I had to meet in order to possibly get the building.
Okay.
And everything brought up to code. They asked me for crazy things like give us like a 10-year projection on your business and all this other weird stuff that I wasn't familiar with. And I would always take it back to my CPA and the architect, and they're like, what? And I don't know any better. So I'm like, this is what the city wants. So they make a
Right.
demand, I go do it. They make a demand, I go
Right.
do it.
Just trying to make this work.
Yeah, every time they put something up, I would do it. And I think the total cost of the building, the operation cost was maybe like 2 million.
Okay.
Okay. And I got to Chase Bank, and I basically, long story short, got Chase to put up 1 million.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. And if they put up 1 million, well, the city said, we'll give you 1 million of that urban fund money if you can go find another 1 million. And I found that 1 million with Chase.
Okay.
And when we were going to bring them to the table, and the building was going to be used as collateral, in case it didn't work, they could take the building. And they didn't think I was going to find the 1 million.
Right.
Okay. I was probably 28 when I was doing this, 29.
Well, okay.
I'm this young black kid that nobody's ever heard of. And like, who is this guy in our office asking us for $1 million?
Right.
And then like I'm meeting all their demands and exceeding it. And so they actually, last thing they did to me was they said I had to pay for an environmental assessment of the land beneath the building, which cost about $250,000.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
said, you pay for that, and then we'll look at it and see if everything works out, then we may
Oh
give you
my
the building.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
And so I was like, wait, you want me to pay for your guys' environmental assessment of this land, and I won't
And this
even,
isn't even
this isn't
guaranteed.
guaranteed?
Yeah.
Who would do that?
Right. I'm out.
And so that's when we all pulled out of the deal.
Gosh.
And since then, they put up construction roadblocks on that street, so traffic can't go through there.
Huh.
It was odd that they shut down that street basically. The effects of that is it choked off charity's business, and everything in that street pretty much died.
That's horrible.
Okay. And you go, and her business is now closed, and a lot of it didn't work out over there. If you go over there now, guess what's over there?
Probably condos.
Condos.
Damn it. How did I know that?
Condos
How did I know
and
that?
other white businesses. They didn't
Gosh,
want us there.
they gentrified it.
That's when I got pissed off and left Columbus.
Well, see? Trash state. I told you. Why are you arguing with me, bro?
I
You
was
know
just
what I'm
like,
talking about.
I'm like, I have evidence that they're. I mean, and I can. I mean, I guess I can't say evidence. All I can say is this is how it felt to me.
Well, come on.
You know, and it felt like they didn't want black people blowing up that town
No, they
and
wanted their
doing our own thing.
condos.
Yeah,
So white folks can get rich off of that area.
yeah. So they kill the King Lincoln District, or they keep it under, because I think the theater's still there. So they keep it there. I think that's there for them to be able to say, well, look, see, we're not a racist city.
Right.
You know, we're open to African Americans, but just to an extent. You know, not too much.
Right. 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 Gosh. Yeah. I mean, gentrification and all that's definitely an area I'm still learning about, like the ins and outs of exactly how people finagle that. But man,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I think the story you just shared is an exact example of that.
yeah.
Gosh.
So Columbus. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So the trash state.
Like I said, I can't go that far. I'll just say they weren't very friendly to me.
Come on.
To the
History
point.
of the KKK. And you can't call it a trash state. I mean, I guess that would be most of the states in this country.
Yeah,
Anyways,
so,
but those are the ones I have experience with. Again, I'm not saying all the people that live in these states are trash. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just, like I said, the history of those things, that stuff doesn't go away. And it's like, I always used to tell people too, when talking about this history of the Klan and stuff, it's like were your uncles and your grandparents and your fathers. And the ironic part is, like, I didn't know at that point that my own father was a KKK sympathizer. He was never part of the Klan that I know of, like, actively. But here I was telling everybody, like, these are your daddies. These are your uncles, your grandparents, your pastors.
yeah.
And here I was. This is also my own father who holds these views, which, like I said, I only found that out about a year ago that he came out with that. So anyways, but yeah, those histories, especially when, it's the systemic racism that we talked about, when these things are in your government institutions and in your systems and your education systems, which that's the case all across this country. But I think that it took root in different ways in each state. And so
Yeah.
I think when that's so deeply ingrained, it's like, that's still going to be playing out today. Like the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that was not really that long ago. Like we think it was so long ago, but those things are still, playing out. But, overall, I made some great friends in Columbus. I'm grateful for the education I got at Ohio State. It's not like I didn't appreciate my time there, but I quickly came to realize, like we talked about, that this is an overgrown small town, and this is what I'm trying to get away from. Like, it's not what I want anymore in my life. And so, so by the time I lived there 2 years, I was, ready. I was ready to move on somewhere bigger. And so that's how I ended up here in Chicago. And now Chicago is starting to kind of feel a little small, not in the same way that Columbus did. So maybe part of that is just getting used to your surroundings. Once it becomes familiar, it doesn't feel so big,
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But anyways, but yes, I have lots of good memories of Ohio. Don't get me wrong. But I just know, and I would hear things when I was in Columbus. I would hear things like, oh, there's this, don't go, I forget the name of this town. Don't drive through this town that's just, 30 miles outside of Columbus, because they're known for skinheads. there's a big group of skinheads there. Or um, like I would track some of these like right wing organizations have been tracked and found that a lot of the headquarters for those are in Ohio, not in Columbus necessarily, but like right outside Columbus. Um, Lots of like right wing orgs that are based there. So just stuff like that, where that's what leads me to be like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm good. So, anyways, um, okay, where are we on time?
Um. Well, we're at an hour.
Okay.
But I think like the last one was like an hour and 20 minutes. I think we're fine over like with an hour and a half.
Okay.
I
So
mean,
keep going.
unless you feel differently.
Well, I'm fine, but my friends are all like, keep it to an hour max.
Yeah.
That's what the people are saying. But
I
whatever, if
mean,
you want
but
to
did
keep
we?
going.
Yeah, a little bit because I feel like
Okay.
it's really open ended right now. I don't feel like we have a. This is like a good stopping point.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I kind of wrapped up what I wanted to say about my parents' relationship. And so I guess to speak about interracial, intercultural relationships more generally is well, and I guess about let's get to the racial fetishes because that's what we've said we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So let me actually talk about some of those. Okay, so again, like I said last time, I'm not anti interracial relationships at all. I just want people to have their eyes open, and especially people of color, right, about some of these factors that can play in intimate relationships. And so let me just throw out a couple of these phrases, I guess, and we'll see what you've heard of, what you
Okay.
haven't. Um, so, so racial fetishes, a racial fetish, from what I understand, the definition of that to be is basically when um, someone kind of dehumanizes another person and is kind of reducing them to certain physical features, right?
Right.
So the shape of Asian women's eyes, or um, black folks, full lips, or different physical features, and that's kind of what they're um, focused on and obsessed with in kind of painting all the people of a certain group as, instead of seeing them as individuals with different personalities and different characteristics. It's kind of like, well, you are Asian or you are black, and so I'm into you because I think you're going to look this certain way.
Let me ask.
But it's all based on stereotypes, right? Because we know not every black person looks the same or every Asian person looks the same. So I think it's hard to separate, like, racial fetishes are also heavily based on stereotypes, right? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I had a question. I was like, when you're saying racial fetishes, it what comes to mind is an automatic like negative connotation to
Right.
it. Is there a difference between a racial fetish and being attracted to a certain kind of person?
Well, I mean, that's the big debate, right?
Because like, what if there is a guy like that's a completely, I don't know, fine person or whatever, and for whatever reason they have an attraction to black women, and they
Yeah.
treat them just fine, but for
Well, I
whatever
mean,
reason they have a bend towards black women, like a bit.
like they have a type, or
Yeah, like it could be a
yeah.
white guy, an Asian guy, a Hispanic guy. He just loves
Well,
black women.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the debate,
Okay.
right? Like, I think people can this is like where it gets complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I mean, I think on some level, sure, we have certain features, characteristics, racial or otherwise, right? That we find attractive. Um, but where does that cross the line
Yeah, that's my next question. Is like, when does it spill over
into
into racial fetish?
exactly? And I think that's the piece that can be hard to figure out sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a very gray, it can be a very gray area. Um, I think, but there are red flags,
Yeah, I guess there
right?
wouldn't be like there can't be a rule or a standard because I think it would be case by case, right? You would have
Yes,
to.
but
Mm-hmm.
there are patterns, as in anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are patterns, and you can start to see those patterns and those red flags, and maybe you don't have to necessarily label it something from the get go. You can give it a little time to see,
Mm-hmm.
with this particular person. But I think with anything, especially when we're talking about racism, we've talked about this a lot. The patterns start to emerge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think once you're familiar with those patterns and familiar with what a fetishing type person or relationship looks like, it's easy to identify that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm at the place that I'm familiar enough with all of this that I can just instantly, there are some areas of racism where I can feel out where you are quickly, right? Like really quickly. I don't mean you, but just a person. Whereas there are other areas where I'm still fine tuning, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring it out. So I am am I don't even want to say an expert, but I'm a lot better in feeling out what what it looks like and feels like when someone's fetishizing me, right? Because that's the experience I've had
Well, I think
throughout my life.
that's the answer. Like what you're saying right now, and I just literally looked up the definition of fetish, and it says a form of sexual desire in which gratification is linked to an abnormal degree to a particular object, item of clothing, part of the body. So abnormal.
Right. And so to add to that definition, an abnormal like part of the body or racial physical characteristic,
Yeah.
right? Because we're particularly talking about this in a racialized way.
Right.
So I've learned, but I still miss it sometimes. But I've learned to identify what that looks like for me as an Asian woman
Mm-hmm.
when I'm being like approached in a very fetishizing or stereotyped kind of way. But I can't say that I instantly am going to recognize what that looks like for a black woman or
Right.
a Latino man, but I'm familiar enough with some of the terminology, I guess. Yeah, like, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought.
Well, I want to ask
Where
you:
should I go?
do you
Yeah,
have an example of what that looks like for you that you're willing to
for me.
share?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have lots of examples. As a person who's in my late 30s and has, you know, dated for a couple of decades now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'll just throw out a couple things. So this one actually happened like a couple weeks ago. Have something hot off the press. Um, went out on a couple dates with this um, man who's an African American man,
Uh-huh.
and second date, all of a sudden he asks me, "You're not even gonna know what to do with this." He
Yeah.
says, "Yeah, I was just we're in the back of a Lyft going somewhere, an Uber," and he says, "Yeah, I was just wanting to know if maybe you could like clip my nails or like give me a manicure later."
What?
I just looked at him.
How
I
old was
was
this
like,
guy? Just best guess.
like late 30s, mid 30s.
And it wasn't even like a bad joke. He was serious.
No, he was serious. Out of the blue. Like we were in the back of this Uber. The driver was black and they were just like joking and laughing, but nothing related at all to like nails. To like cutting up. We were all laughing, having a good time, talking about like, I don't even remember what we were talking about. And then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, a pause in the conversation. And I'm just like, what why would you even ask me that? And like, is this something you ask all women on your second date? I I can't help but think this is because I'm Asian and you're somehow associating me because so many Asian, I'm breaking it down for our listeners, right? So many Asians own nail salons.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, so that may not be him. like a direct, you know, fetish, quote unquote, I guess. But that's letting me know his he's viewing me in an extremely racialized way based on stereotypes. And also, you know, is he just assuming like I'm there to like wait on him? Like who asks a grown ass adult to clip their nails? Like
Yeah, I'm kind of dumbfounded. Like I don't
dumbfounded,
even know how to
right?
respond to that. Like rather than being into you, the person, it's the
Yeah,
idea.
the idea of me.
Yeah,
And that gets at what these fetishes are, right? It's the idea of you as a person of X race or, you know, and based on stereotypes. And some of those are sexual, some of those are not sexual, right? Clipping your nails.
hey, maybe it
But
is for him.
or maybe it is.
Maybe
You
that's
never
his
know.
thing.
He did have like a hand fetish thing, so maybe it was. Maybe it's connected. Um, and this is a person that, you know, he makes six figures, you know, has two college degrees, worked as a successful journalist for 6 years. You know, this isn't some like, I mean, he is weird, but this isn't some like, you know, person that just can't function in society or he's functioning on some level. So that's one example. My ex fiance, this is a big reason why he's the ex fiance.
Yeah.
This is when I was in Columbus, so back to that.
Hooray.
Yeah, yay, Columbus. But one time told, and he was in his mid 30s at the time. This was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. A white man, and this is when I was in grad school. But yeah, he at one point told me that he had this like, you know, sexual fantasy of me dressing up like this Asian schoolgirl or something. And I was like, okay, creepy on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Like, that's just weird. Like, and a schoolgirl. Like, that's weird too. Like, I don't know, some people are into those kind of things, but I'm just like, no, bro. Like, that it's just weird. And, you know, some other like I mean, he was also someone who very much expected me as the woman to do everything around the house. And I mean, just the cooking and just cater to him in every single way. And again, I can't help but think, I mean, maybe he's that way towards all women, or maybe those expectations were even higher of me as an Asian woman. You know, and you don't know. I'm not inside his brain.
Right.
Like, you don't know exactly what people are thinking, but
But you know how it feels.
I know how it feels, and I know I'm familiar with the messages that that white folks are internalizing through media about Asian women or black men. We know the stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
And so then when people are interacting with you in a way that kind of is very much leaning on those stereotypes, it's like, yeah, this is likely playing into this person's interaction with me. So those are, I mean, those are a few examples.
I love it when, and I don't know if this has happened to you, when the response to if you speak out about whatever is happening that makes you uncomfortable, it's you're overreacting.
Right.
I love that. I'm like,
Yeah, it's fun.
because you would know. You know,
Right.
like what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. Um, there was also this was longer ago, maybe 8 or so years ago. This was back when I still lived in southern Indiana. A Jamaican guy that I dated for a couple of months, and started to realize that he had more anti-black prejudice and like had internalized that to a larger degree. I mean, like we would get into arguments like where I was the one like defending black folks and he was the one like talking about like Nigerians and this and that and they do all this and I'm like I remember one time he said something about Nigerians put like poop in a jar and like put it in their closet. I mean, just stupid shit. And I'm like, what are you? And this was his like example of how like black folks are uncivilized or whatever. And I'm just like,
Oh, that's self hatred. Oh, I hate
yeah.
that.
And his, I mean, and his, he had been married before. His ex-wife was white. And so when we talk about patterns, right? And I started to notice like in his life, I felt like everything about his life was him trying to get in good with white people,
See,
right?
it's that guy.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that. It's that's the guy that makes my life more difficult. It's that guy.
Damn you, Jamaican man.
It's that guy because I'm married to a quote unquote white woman,
Right.
you know, and that's because I've had several. Ooh, I could tell you some stories about who people think I am, who they think the reason they think they know the reason I'm married to my wife, or
Right.
they know what kind of black man I am because I'm married to my wife,
Right.
and it's that guy.
Right. And that sucks. I mean, that sucks to for you to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But those assumptions are there for a reason. And I'm not
No, because
defending
they're
that.
real people.
Right.
Like you just gave the example. There are guys out there doing that. There are not guys,
Right.
but there's people doing that.
Right. Right. So yeah, so I mean those are a couple of examples from my life. I mean, but there's a tons. Those are just a few. Like, and I've had people. I think even being mixed race, like it's like people feel like entitled to dissect me in a way that is just like really fucked up.
Hmm.
Like one time, this guy, I used to do a lot of like salsa dancing, swing dancing, Lindy Hop. Just I don't know. I just like dancing. It's fun.
Hmm.
And so I was out one time with a friend, and this guy asked me, about my background, which is code for, what race are you? And when I told him, he's like, yeah, but you have a white body.
There it
Like looked
is.
me up and down.
There it
And I'm
is.
like, what does that even mean? I
There
mean,
it
I know what
is.
it means, but it's like I don't fit the stereotypical, which isn't even true of all Asians at all, right? But the stereotypical image of like the super thin Asian woman. Like I'm not like big, but I'm like a little curvier than that, and
Hmm.
so it's like, oh, well, you have a white body. And I'm like, what? Like, how do people feel emboldened? Like, I didn't even know this guy's name. Like, I didn't know he was a stranger. And you feel emboldened to like just analyze me. And people have done that about, my racial identity my whole life too. Like, oh, well, you're a fake Asian or you're not a real, you know, a real Asian because I don't fit into their stereotypes of what a quote unquote real Asian sounds like or looks like, which is, people who have migrated recently, right? Like an accent and a this and a that. And I don't fit that. And so it's like, so they feel entitled to just completely erase my Chinese heritage because I don't fit their stereotypical notion of what an Asian woman should look like or sound like. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck you.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what people would tell me my whole life. Like my whole life, that was the type of scrutiny, and people just felt like they could just tell me who I was racially, um, and just come to their own conclusions and let me know how they were labeling me. And I'm like, I'm not over here talking about what kind of white person you are, or like whether you fit my stereotypes as a white person or not, or you know what I'm saying, but you feel like you can just tell me that.
Yeah. Hey
And
Matt,
so,
you talk white.
right? Yeah,
Word.
right.
So what am I supposed to sound like? Why don't you go ahead and give me an example?
Yeah, why don't you? Actually, that's great. I'm going
Just
to try
go
to
ahead
remember
and
that.
do that real quick. And the sad thing about that is I get that from black and white people.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
really? My own people? Really?
right.
That's what we're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. Maybe this is we're coming up to maybe a good stopping point, but this is man, I feel like we could do this like a whole episode, just share those kind of stories.
I think we should.
And maybe that will enlighten some people that aren't aware of it, that maybe I shouldn't be saying those kind of things, or maybe it makes them think about it.
I think we should have a to be continued.
Yeah.
And there's a few more like racial fetish things I haven't gotten to.
Oh, absolutely. We still
So
haven't finished
let's do a
that.
part. Well, let's do a part three. Why not?
Yeah. So did you want to do like, I guess, where we just share, we're like having like a meeting conversation now on the podcast. Do you want
Yeah.
to I know I don't give a fuck. No, I'm kidding. Do you want to have like a just a separate episode to talk about like stereotypes where we
Sure.
share those kind of
Yeah.
stories?
Yeah.
All right.
I
I guess
think it'd be
I
good.
guess we put that on the docket.
Because I mean, I think hearing people's personal experiences of here's what people have said to me. I think sometimes people just don't, it's too vague, like for them to really understand. So I think hearing personal examples is really, um, it can be powerful in a different kind of way. And I think it's therapeutic for us
I know,
to
right?
just talk about have a bitch session.
Call the episode bitchin'.
I mean,
Hey, I might just do that.
and then you want to know what this motherfucker said to me?
All right. Well, this motherfucker said this to me. Well, my motherfucker said this. Well, my motherfucker said this.
I think this is something one of my friend Evelyn, I'm going to be talking about her a lot,
Yeah.
pointed out too though. And this could be a whole nother another podcast too, but she was like, I'm so glad she's a black woman
Yeah.
from originally from Zimbabwe, but she was like, I think it's so good that you're talking about your experiences as an Asian woman because people are so quick to try to well, and the national narrative has tried to put Asians in this category of like almost white or like honorary whites, or they're people of color but they don't really face racism. And granted, it's different. Like I get that I am not facing racism on the scale that the majority of black folks are facing racism in this country. I readily acknowledge that. But it all comes out of the same place. Like I would have these conversations with my friend in grad school, and she would be a black friend, and she would be so surprised sometimes at the things I would talk about. And I'm like, white supremacy spares no one, right? Like if you're not white supremacy is not going to spare you. Like, and those experiences we have, play out differently. The experiences you have as a black man are going to be different than the racist experiences I have as an Asian woman, and yet there are so many common threads, and patterns, and it's all coming from white supremacy. And I think if we could like, I don't know, I guess cue this is where I'm supposed to go into the if we could all just get along, like, but I mean, I think even as people of color, right, if we could just grab onto that a little bit more, that like, yes, our experiences of racism are different, and yeah, black folks have it the worst for sure, but let's like try to understand each other and realize that this is all coming from the same common place, and there's probably a lot more here we could resonate with than not if we would just like listen and talk to each other. So sorry, there's my super cliche spiel.
No, but that's so obvious, but that thought specifically has never occurred to me what you just said, as far as it's all coming from the same source.
Yeah.
But because you often hear about the arguments between races and cultures or whatever, or even male and female, where you'll see like, and it's wrong, but it's not. It's wrong, but it's not wrong. And what I mean is, like, you'll hear like some, I forget who it was, oh, like a white female movie star said something like, our she compared the women's struggle to African American struggles. When you get
Right.
those like comparisons, you're like, whoa, 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 because we're not saying that that's not true, but it's almost kind of like that all lives matter thing where you're like taking away from the black issue. Like, no, 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 no. It is not
Right.
the same.
Yes, I think there's danger in overgeneralizing,
Yeah,
right? And not recognizing the specifics of different people groups' oppression or different, but there's also danger in, I think, getting so overly specific that we don't recognize the common source of these issues, or recognize like that we're really working for the same goal, or we could be if we got our shit together.
yeah,
um that's why I get so mad. Sometime I'll go into this. We should do another podcast on this, but like I get so mad at like there's a ton of anti-black prejudice in Asian communities. It's a big issue, and I see that in some of my family members sometimes. And just went off on a couple. I have some very distant cousins in California that I've gotten into it like big time with them a couple different times, because they've grown up in very like Asian bubbles, like the typical California, Bay Area Asian bubble, and don't really understand what it's like in the rest of the country. Um, and yeah, I mean, they'll just be spewing this like anti-black prejudice. And I'm like, will y'all get yourselves together? Because like you're really pissing me off right now. Like, you all of all people should understand, you know what I'm saying? As like Asian migrants, unless they're in such a bubble in the area where they live that they haven't really experienced that, which I think is true for some Asians on the West Coast. But anyways, I'm getting off on a whole nother
yeah, and I don't
sorry,
know if this is exactly
bunny
what you're
trail.
saying, but it's kind of like in my head when I hear you say that is it's like, well, at least we're not black.
Yeah.
I hear that from I've heard that before. I'll just say that,
Yeah.
and we should be happy about that. It's feels like
But I'm
betrayal.
yeah, and my thing is like if you all know anything about the history of Asian Americans in this country, then you would know like there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. Like Chinese people were the first ethnic group that was specifically barred from migrating. Like that was like Chinese Exclusion Act. These people cannot immigrate here. Like, and a lot of my family members were affected by that in huge ways.
Yeah,
I mean, there were Asian folks, Chinese folks that were lynched in on the West Coast in pretty large numbers. Like, there's lots of, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm just like, if y'all knew anything about like the history of Asian Americans in this country and what our own experiences have been, then you should be able to, based on that, validate what our African American brothers and sisters and other people of color are saying. Like, come on. So, anyways, you can tell I get like heated around this topic. So we'll do a podcast about that too.
yeah, yeah. Super interesting because I have questions about that just personally because what was I I don't know a whole lot about this and maybe you do where what is it called, the railroads that they were working on in the United States.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The Chinese folks built
Yeah, and something about they were using drugs
to
and
control.
they used that to arrest them or get rid of them or something like that. Does that sound familiar to any?
Um,
I can't. I need to research this a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I mean, I know there was a ton of corrupt, I mean, just abusive practices towards Chinese folks that were building the railroad, but I would have to kind of like
it's
brush up on specifics of that too.
That's probably even that a whole other thing. It's one of those situations where you see the government enacting systematic racism.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, we have been victims of this and still are today too. So why is it so hard to understand that like Black folks have been and are as well?
Right.
Like, come on, people. I get frustrated.
So yeah.
Anyways, but yes, let's wrap this up. We have lots of good podcast ideas for.
Yeah, this is going to go on for a while. So.
Yes.
And we'll share more about that later.
Okay.
So thank you again for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Okay, you as well. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
So there you go. Another great episode, I think, talking about that stuff that makes people uncomfortable. And if you're not uncomfortable in life, I don't think you're growing. Can't live in your comfort zone the whole time. So let me go ahead and get us out of here so I don't get yelled at for podcast being too long. I'm just going to shuffle a song here to take us out, and hopefully something fun comes up. I don't care.
One time.
Foxy Brown featuring Method Man, It'll Not Die. Let's let this rock. See you guys. I'll actually be out of town next week, so I either will have a replay episode up or no episode, but I'll be back the week after for sure with a new episode.